Hi, everybody. Welcome to the program. For the next month and a half, we're going to be speaking with some of the top coaches, players, sports performance consulting coaches, and just people from the area as to how they're handling the coronavirus situation and talk about their life, their story, on why they've become one of the top players, coaches, or noted figures in the area. Something that you may want to take as you go down the line here as you're trying to pass through some time and learn from some of the top players, top coaches, and top sports performance consultants that we have around. So, in this edition of today's Quarantine Time with James Escarcega, we'll speak with noted sports performance consultant and former CIF championship coach, Ray Lokar.
My oldest son is a college basketball coach. He's an assistant at Pomona-Pitzer College, and they were in the Sweet 16 of the Division III playoffs when this was all going down. They were on a plane, boarding a plane at Ontario Airport to fly to Chicago to play Elmhurst University. And they didn't shut off their phones when they were supposed to shut off their phones after the doors closed, and they started to pull away from the gate. And a tweet came through saying the NCAA had canceled everything. So word traveled through the cabin. The stewardess got a hold of it, went up and talked to the captain. The captain pulled back to the gate, let them off, unloaded their luggage, and that was how their season ended.
Our conversation with noted sports performance consultant and CIF championship coach Ray Lokar coming up. Hi, everybody. James Escarcega here as we start. Well, hopefully, will be a first of what many I call video conferences. We're going to talk to a lot of coaches, players, everybody. Just as you know, we got time. We've got more than enough time, as we like to say. So we just excuse me, want to just pick some brains with some of the coaches and the players in the area, see how they're handling things and all that. And at the same time, we'll do some teaching as well. And so today, I've got with us my good friend Ray Lokar, who is the CIF championship basketball coach. I had the great pleasure of watching his teams play over at St. Anthony and Bishop Amat. He's now a sports performance consultant. He's got his company Gold Standard Coaching, I should say. That's my bad, coach. He knows his stuff. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to kind of break this up into two videos. So that we don't throw a lot at you. We're going to throw enough at you so that for these two videos you can extrapolate what you want out of them. Hopefully, if you're a parent, coach, player, you'll get something out of this. And coach, it's great to see you, my friend. I wish I had the background you've got, man.
Well, if you're going to be at home, this isn't a bad place to be.
No, it's not. Are you able to jump in the pool?
It's a little cold, but we do a polar plunge January 1st at halftime of the Rose Bowl every day. It's kind of fun. You're more than invited to do that one with us.
Wow. Okay. I'm just gonna leave that there, so to speak. So, before we touch on this, Ray, I always want to throw a hypothetical at you. Okay. I'm gonna create a mythical high school here. I'm gonna call it Hope High School. You're the basketball coach. How are we handling things right now a little bit here? I mean, this is unprecedented times for everybody involved here. Just from a coaching point of view, with a broad stroke, how would you be handling things here a little bit?
Well, I might answer the mythical question with some real life answers that I've dealt with, personally over the last 2 weeks. My oldest son is a college basketball coach. He's an assistant at Pomona-Pitzer College, and they were in the Sweet 16 of the Division III playoffs when this was all going down. They were on a plane, boarding a plane at Ontario Airport to fly to Chicago to play Elmhurst University. And they didn't shut off their phones when they were supposed to shut off their phones after the doors closed, and they started to pull away from the gate. And a tweet came through saying the NCAA had canceled everything. So word traveled through the cabin. The stewardess got a hold of it, went up and talked to the captain. The captain pulled back to the gate, let them off, unloaded their luggage, and that was how their season ended.
Wow.
So that's about as abrupt an ending as there could be. With high school athletes now, it's been kind of gradual. That last week we had, a game scheduled, it rained, it got rained out, and then all of a sudden we're suspending things, and then it's gradually gotten to the point where they're getting close to just saying, we're done for the school year and we're going to have to try to figure out what we're going to do. You had some great baseball coaches on the other day that I thought had some, really good ideas into the summer. So, the first thing that I reject is the notion that this is not fair, that we've been robbed of something, we've been cheated out of, the playoffs, our senior season, or whatever. Because the reality is that's just life, and there's been things going on through history. When they first suspended play, my youngest son, Tyler, who's a senior in high school, he came up and he says, Dad, we're living history right now. He says, I'm going to have a story to tell my grandkids. And, if you think about it that way, there's been disappointment, tragedy, people losing things all the way through history, from 9/11 to Katrina to floods and fires and tornadoes and wars and, the Depression. And every generation has got a story, something that they had to go through. So this is just ours, and we need to approach it that way. The good news about that is when we hear all those people tell those stories, they all came out of it, right? They were able to navigate it and, overcome some of that disappointment, some of that trauma. And the reality is that it probably made them stronger in the end.
It's a good point. Very good point, Ray. And I think there's a thing I always say, which is don't be a victim of your circumstance. Stay in your vision. It's something my good friend Dr. Kevin Alco, who's one of my go-to guys in sports performance, always says, don't be a victim of your circumstance, live in your vision. And for a lot of people right now, they're just stuck in their circumstance. Hey, we can't play, can't practice, and everything else. Well, it's a good opportunity. I think this is a great opportunity for coaches and players to kind of peel back on the onion a little bit and to kind of, take a fresh perspective on how their program is. And it's an interesting point that Urban Meyer made on a podcast with Tim Kite on Focus 3 that I was listening to a couple of days ago, in which he said that he's on several board of directors for these companies now. And he recorded this podcast before the season started, saying before everything went down, saying, this virus is coming and it's going to, we're going to find out who the rock solid companies are, the ones who have a great culture and the ones who don't. And I feel the same way kind of when it comes to high school teams, right? We're going to find out really fast how strong a program is with their culture and everything, and the ones that are kind of teetering on that border, as I like to say. Am I on the right page here?
100% correct. And you could probably make the prediction on which of those are, right now. An old colleague of mine, good friend, Paul Svagdis, he's the baseball coach at Azusa Pacific. Mm-hmm. He was the baseball coach at Pomona-Pitzer College when I was an assistant basketball coach there. So we worked together for a while, and he said something the other day that I thought was great. When he knew this was coming, he called his old college baseball coach at Tufts University, who gave him some advice. And he said, really, this is the time to put all of those lessons that we've learned in sports into action, right? As athletes, Paul said, we've trained you to control the controllables and to be great teammates and put your teammates first, or the community first, and to develop what I call in gold standard coaching, some TRG, toughness, resilience, and grit, which are all different things. I think toughness is the ability to focus on what's important right now, right? And that the only thing that's important right now. And then that gives you a little bit of mental toughness and a little bit of physical toughness. When you're resilient, you can respond from a failure and compete on the next play, right? And continue to work that way. But grit is really that long-term work towards something that you're passionate about, whether, it's a season coming out of a losing streak, or whether it's making it through, this time when we're away from, the games and the people that we love, and seeing if we can come out stronger at the end. So it's time for us as coaches and players to put those lessons into action and see how well we're doing. And, I encourage my son to help others through that too. He's taken it surprisingly well. I think because, well, it's like what they say about when's the best time to plant a tree. 20 years ago, yep. Right? Yep. But the next best time is now, right? So some people are dealing with it now. Some people have built that culture or raised their kids in a way that they have those life lessons already, and they're able to deal with them a little bit. But really, that's something that, hopefully with our athletes has been built into them by their coaches and parents over their athletic careers.
So let's get to work here, Ray. Let's give the, we got some tools here and now, and I say this quantitatively, saying this is not a one size fit all here. There's many tools out there. We've all read books and everything else. And so, I don't believe in a one size fit all, method, because I don't think that an extra large shirt should fit a guy who's a medium, who's built medium. It's whatever you can extrapolate. There's many books out there. There's many systems out there and everything else. So we're just giving you a few tools. Again, if you want to use it, you can. If you can, you cannot. Again, you're talking to an assistant coach who's won a CIF championship. The guy next on the other side has won a basketball championship. So we kind of know what, as someone told me once, what it looks like. So the first thing, Ray, we want to talk about here, and this is going to be geared toward the players, is for them to have a productive growth experiences in and out of competition. So let's just take the ball rolling here, boss man.
Yeah, well, it starts by learning in competition, those lessons that we just discussed. But outside of competition, being able to evaluate your performance in a way that it allows you to either win or to learn, right? I mean, you've heard that all the time. I don't lose, I learn. I think that, when parents and coaches understand that, the two roles that we have in sports is to teach kids to compete and to build character, that when we focus on the character part, that actually helps us compete a little bit better. From the time that kids start playing, whether it's Little League or Junior All-American or NJB basketball, I think that parents and coaches need to understand that the more that they take the focus off of the scoreboard and stats and standings and roles on the team, and they all develop this fear of failure, and instead focus on their personal best and improving all the time and being able to compete at the next play regardless of what happened last play. When you start to develop that attitude from the time kids are young, then that trickles into their life off of the floor, off of the field, and they're able to deal with those setbacks that very same way. I'm not too proud to say that I'm kind of a fan of American Idol, and always have been, for whatever reason, just because I like to see people achieve. And they used to show people that got voted off a lot more and their reaction. And when they would storm out of the room and they would scream and cry and swear at people and say it's not fair, I used to always turn and say, that person never played sports. Because it teaches us we don't always get what we want. Sometimes we're going to fail. We might need to go back to the drawing board and see what's going on. So when we build those kind of habits in kids, when we start to face some adversity, we deal with it a little bit better. My oldest daughter, she was all CIF at Western Christian, went and played at University of Redlands, went to Azusa Pacific to get her doctorate in physical therapy. So now she's Dr. Thomas. And when she graduated, walked across the stage and got her doctorate, I asked her, I said, how did you get through all of those tough times, such a rough, rigorous schedule, and the labs, in the basement, and how did you get through that? And she said, Daddy, I never would have made it if it wasn't for shooting slumps and losing streaks. So by allowing kids to embrace the struggle and helping them deal through it instead of acting like it's the end of the world when they lose a ball game, then once we face tough times, then we're gonna deal with it a little bit different, a little bit better. And like Coach Sagda said, put those lessons to use. And that has to happen, James, on a daily basis, right? It has to happen in practice as well as during a game. Like you can't, just give it lip service and then rant and rave after a loss. You have to be able to deal with failure as a coach as well.
One of the books I've had a chance to read is this great book called "What Drives Winning" by Brett Ledbetter. It's a marvelous. His 3-book library is absolutely marvelous, and he talks about, Ray, in there, the difference from being player first to person first. Being the player first is attached to the achievement, is defined by the result, where the player first, as he explains it, you value the outcome in a much different way.
Right.
Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. For the last 15 years, I've been speaking and consulting with schools and administrations and coaches and parents, nationwide, really. And I had a chance to sit down with Charlie Maher, who was a sports psychologist for the Cleveland Indians and the Cleveland Cavaliers at one point in time. And I think he's still with the Indians. But something that he told me that kind of stuck out was, as soon as somebody comes into their organization, the first thing he talks to them about is, being an athlete is what you do. It's not who you are. And to be honest, I fight that a little bit around the field and in the gym, because when you look at kids that compete, like a really common phrase that everybody uses, why he's really a player, right? He's a baseball player. He's not just playing baseball. And, that's kind of a complimentary term based on, their sports IQ and the way that they play and their competitiveness. But the reality is we don't want them to look at themselves that way, right? We want them to understand that they're a person first that happens to play baseball and do it really good, or football or basketball or whatever. Because when they call the minor leaguers in and they have this talk, that enables them to deal with failure and setbacks a lot better, right? Their 0 for 4 performance or getting shelled or getting beat isn't a reflection on them as a person. They just had a bad day. So embrace that bad day, figure it out, and get back to work.
One of the signs I used to have in my office when I was at South Hills coaching, I used to have it anywhere. You couldn't miss it when you walked in my office, which was right next to the weight room, was attitude is everything.
For sure.
And for me, that is the biggest thing today, that if there's something that's held the test of time, is your attitude. And I'm just not talking about the players. I'm talking about the coaches, everybody within the structure of that program. If everybody has a bad attitude, you're going to get the result I used to say you deserve, which is under 500 or whatever. But if everybody's pulling on the same page and has a great attitude and is willing to learn, embraces adversity and learns from it, you're on your way.
Yeah, without a doubt, for the good of the group, right? And all those people, whether they're players that might not be starting or playing the position that they want, or on the team that they want, or the level that they want, or parents that want their kid to play, they need to look at the big picture instead, right? It's like that person that's taken a great drive up the coast, and they're focusing on the bugs on the windshield instead of looking at the great scenery. Right? You got to look at the big picture a little bit instead of just how it affects you individually. And when you have that kind of attitude where you put the group first, it comes back to pay off in the long run for yourself as well. But yeah, those teams with great attitudes are the ones that really succeed, and people that have great attitudes are the ones that go far.
And I want to make this clear. I want to make this clear here to any player who's watching this, and probably for parents too, and we'll tailor the other video for coaches, but they have to understand this is not easy. It's hard. It's hard to get where you want to go, to set your goals and say, okay, here we go. It's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, James. it's funny this the way this story goes. I left Bishop Amat in the 80s and went and coached at Pomona-Pitzer College for 9 years. And I worked with a guy who's one of the best in the business at any level. His name's Charlie Katsifikas. And I was there for his first, he had just taken over for Greg Popovich. So he was an assistant, he moved up, and I moved in as the assistant spot. So, so the guys lost Pop and got me. Yeah, great deal. But, I was there for his first 137 wins. He's got over 500 now. And my son is an assistant coach there now. And the day that they got 500 wins, he tied me at 137. He's been there for now too. But, so we used to have all these stories that we would share. And, Sean comes home one day and he sends me a text. You won't believe what Kat said in the locker room. Got all the guys together, and this is to your point. He said, not everybody can be a champion, right? It takes something special, something extra to be a champion. You need to be more than just the average human, right? The average human is average. So you need to be better than that. You need to be superhuman. And he was exaggerating, of course, but, his point about being superhuman is that, you've got to do things that the normal or average human being doesn't do. That's why they're average, in order to be a champion. And if you choose not to, it doesn't make you a bad person. You just can't be a champion, right? And I think that, not everybody has that in them. Not everybody wants to go the extra mile or do the extra thing. And that doesn't necessarily make them a bad person on your team. It just means that their, objectives and goals are a little bit different, right? Not a bad person, but just not that person that's going to be a champion. So, sometimes I say, be superhuman, do that little bit extra. And that's really what we have to do, during this time, right? You have to do that little bit extra to make sure that we continue to progress. Because the average kid right now, he's looking at, a 6-month vacation, right? He's sitting, playing video games, maybe doing a little bit of schoolwork, watching a lot of Netflix. But are you willing to do that little bit extra, right? Are you willing to put in a individual workout and consider all those things that, those professional athletes are doing during their off season all alone? The way I've told some coaches is welcome to the 80s. Right? Do you remember when we used to have the association rule where we couldn't do anything? When I was at Pomona-Pitzer, we couldn't, from the day that the season ended until October 15th, we couldn't see the players and do anything in practice or games or anything. And so we started October 15th. We, conditioned for a couple of weeks. And by November, by Thanksgiving, we were pretty darn good. So I think, like you said at the very outset, being able to reset and reevaluate and see what's really important. Playing 50 games in the summer for a basketball team and 10 in the fall and 10 in the, spring probably isn't going to get you a whole lot better than, if you cut that in half and did twice as many practices and individual workouts. So it is a chance for us to reset and, it's like I call it the Lotto principle. If a little is good, a lotto is better. Yeah. Not necessarily the key, but that's where we've gone. So, while we do these things, and we'll talk about it with coaches, as parents, we've got to encourage kids to get out and move and stay healthy and do some things like that, rather than just, letting them lie around and be slugs.
I always call it the 10-80-10 curve. I think you've heard it before. You got the 10% that are not really good, the 80% that are good, and then you have the 10% that are elite. Yep. And sometimes it's so hard to get from that 80% being good to that 10% being elite. And yep. I'm just talking not just from a player point of view, but from a team point of view. And it's not easy.
No, absolutely. And a personal point of view, right?
Yes.
Character.
Yes. Next point we want to hit here real fast, but I think it's very important here too, Ray, is parents have to have a reduced stress so they can enjoy the experience. And we've all experienced this, right? And you've just done it yourself, so to speak. I'm kind of teaching my sister here a little bit, not to drive the result, but let them learn and everything else. And I think the key word here for me, Ray, is control. Parents love to control their kids, and I think the earlier you're in competition, and first off, you have the ability when when your kids are sick, you have the ability to choose who you want, what your program you want to be with. There's a ton of little league programs out there. West Covina. You get to choose where you want your kid to play, and once you make that decision, and you feel like, okay, you know what, these coaches are really good. They know what they're talking about. I need to step away. That is the biggest problem, the biggest hurdle I see right now with parents today.
No, that's absolutely right. And you alluded to it, that, the hardest thing to do is to transition from coach dad to just dad, right? And to sit and watch, because you don't have any of that control anymore. And parents want to control things. But the other thing, that you mentioned is you have a lot of things to choose from. And what happens is they continue to make that choice, right? So they make a choice and they go somewhere, and things don't go 100% their way. And they decide, okay, well, I have free choice, so I'm just going to go somewhere else and avoid that struggle, right? You talk about we used to talk about helicopter parents, and now it's the snowplow parents that try to move all obstacles away from their kid and try to make it easy for them. And they're doing their kids a huge disservice by doing that. Allow them to struggle a little bit. I've gone through it with all 4 of my kids. There's been a time in each of their careers where things didn't go exactly as they would like, whether it was my daughter in college, somebody being recruited over and started for a little bit before she won the spot back. And at the end of the day, that made her feel better that she won the spot back. Or, kids not playing the position they want or whatever. So we talked about those kind of things. But, fight through it, right? Work harder, earn a spot. And I think when you make that commitment to do that, you come out better in the long run. I heard somebody once say that even if you had the worst coach in the world and you lost every game, if as a parent you focused on your job, which is to build character, then there are all sorts of lessons to be learned there, right? But as parents, a lot of times we get into that job of what the coach's role should be. At the beginning of a lot of my talks, I'll sit down. With gold standard coaching, if we sit down with parents first and talk about their goals and get them to decide what their goals are, then talk about the roles of parents and coaches, and explain that to coaches, it's almost hard to walk out of that room without a shared vision. Because really there are some things that coaches are just, it's their job. It's in their job description to prepare their kids to compete, whether it's practice or scouting or making a lineup or preparation. All those things are the coach's job, and the parent doesn't have any control over those things. The parent always hopes that the kid develops some character and learns how to deal with defeat and becomes a better teammate, and learns a little bit of sportsmanship. Every parent will tell me that at the beginning of every talk. And if they focus on those kind of things, they're going to come out with a better kid at the end. And if you had kids with all of those qualities, you'd win more in the first place, which is what the coach really wants. So if we both do our roles, coaches and parents, then we're really working together to making the program as good as it can possibly be. And once we realize as parents that it's not really the result that is important, it's the competitive toughness that our kids are developing through their best effort, their focus on improvement, and ability to get over the last play and move on to the next one. That eliminates all of the stress, because now when there's a bad call, get over it. Deal with it, right? When my kid's not playing, work harder, deal with it. Give me a little bit of effort. And that develops, not only that, TRG, toughness, resilience, and grit, but it develops that kind of growth mindset that Carol Dweck talks about, where, we're looking to improve instead of thinking that our abilities are just fixed and we're trying to make do with what we have.
Biggest thing for me too, Ray, and I see, I see it a lot in youth games. I see a little bit more youth games now than I have in the past, just because I have a nephew and a niece that are playing these days. Is as parents, you got to be as calm as you can be. Your kids are watching you, and so if you getting angry at an umpire or an official or whatever, the kids are going to pick up on that because you're usually either the first or the second person they're in a moment of high intensity, they're going to look to either the coach or yourself. And if you're losing it, they're going to feel panicked. Whereas if you're just calm and you take care of everything, I think it all works out in the end. It all works out in the end. A little adversity, bases loaded, one out, not the end of the world. Let's get 2 outs and we're on to the bottom of the third here, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure. And my inner coach comes out once in a while when I'm in the stands, and I have to check myself as well. But for the most part, we've got to get over that reaction. And not only do we have to get over our reaction for the bad stuff like that, but I think one of the things that's hard is getting over our reaction to the good stuff too. And so the more poised we can be, the more composure we can have, the better off the kids are as well. And that's contagious, right? When I start complaining about the umpires, the person next to me is starting to complain about the umpires. Now everybody's complaining about the umpires. The kids think that we're getting ripped off by the umpires. And now those kids have an excuse, right? They're not accountable for their performance. It was the umpire's fault, or it was, somebody else's fault. And we need to try to avoid that accountability escape because that's rampant in society today, right?
And coaches can do this too, Ray. They can set the tone for the season in that first meeting, either in the spring, if you're a football coach in the spring or in the summer or whatever, when you have your parent meeting, and you can start, and then this is, to me, the biggest word, which is standard. You can set the standard for what your program is all about. We want to, we want to be uplifting and everything else. And there is kind of time to be a little self-critical, so to speak, but we don't want to be complainers here. Okay. We're not about that. And go ahead.
That goes a little bit to, the fourth thing that we do with Gold Standard Coaching that we might not talk about too much here is, our talks with administrators and leaders. The coaches are on edge and walking on eggshells. You talked about relieving stress from parents. We want to relieve stress from coaches too, and help them, serve players and parents and keep their job at the same time, because they're worried that their reaction is going to have some backlash. Like, I haven't been afraid to tell a booster club president, that's not how we're going to do things here. Or, somebody else, you can take your money and go home. Or take a player, tell their dad, I know you bought us a gun machine, but I don't need it that bad. Why don't you take your son elsewhere? The coach has got to have the courage to do that, because that's just our standards, and that's just the way it needs to be done. But you can't do that if you're afraid of losing your job, right? So one of two things has to happen. Either you're okay with leaving, if that's what happens and comes down the pike, or you have an administration that steps up and puts teachers and coaches first.
We're going to talk about that on the other side of this the video, on the second part of the video coming up. Refreshing, very relevant today. We have what seems like it's going to be quite a while before we're back on the field. So I think this is a great way for a lot of players in the area to kind of, and parents, to take a fresh restart, as we like to say, and look at the man in the mirror. Are we doing enough as parents to get our kids to grow and become better adults? Because, athletics is an extracurricular activity, which is supposed to allow us to become better people when we go out in life. And there's studies that prove that way. But the conversation is so relevant here. Quickly, Ray, website, how people can get a hold of you. Go.
I'm at Coach Loke on Twitter, goldstandardcoaching.com, or 909-542-TALK.
And that's the first of our 2 conversations with Ray Lokar. I'm James Escarcega. Thanks for watching, and stay safe.